When my Alexa turned on at 3 a.m. and said, "Someone is watching your camera," I thought it was a glitch. When I asked who, and it responded, "Behind you," my blood turned to ice. I live alone. I turned around and something moved in the darkness. What I discovered in the next 5 minutes changed everything I thought I knew about the person I trusted most. My name is Kara Hoffman. I'm 28 years old, and I work remotely as a graphic designer from my apartment in Portland, Oregon. I live alone on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse building, surrounded by smart home devices I thought made my life easier and safer. The voice that came through my Alexa that night wasn't warning me about a stranger. It was alerting me to someone who'd been inside my home, who knew my routines, who'd been watching me for weeks. And the worst part? It was someone I knew. Before we dive into what happened, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I moved to Portland 8 months before that terrifying night. My apartment is in the Pearl District, one of those trendy converted warehouse buildings with exposed brick walls, huge industrial windows, and all the modern features you could want. It's a 900 square foot loft, and I fell in love with it the moment I walked in. After years of feeling trapped in a relationship that wasn't healthy, having my own space felt like freedom. I should explain why I moved. I'd been dating a guy named Trevor for 3 years, and the breakup was messy. It took me a long time to realize he was manipulating me, controlling little things in ways that seemed caring at first, but were actually about power. When I finally ended it, he didn't take it well. He showed up at my old apartment 3 times in the first month, begging me to reconsider, telling me I was making a mistake. That's partly why I moved to this new building, to get a fresh start somewhere he'd never been. My daily routine was simple and comfortable. I'd wake up around 8 a.m., make coffee, and work from my home office designing graphics for various clients. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which means I spend most of my days alone in my apartment staring at my computer screen. I'd work until 5 or 6 p.m., then do yoga or take walks along the waterfront. Evenings were for relaxing, watching Netflix, reading, the normal stuff people do when they live alone. I'd usually be in bed by 11 p.m. It was predictable, maybe even boring to some people, but I loved it. After years of drama with Trevor, boring felt amazing. I'm really close with my older sister, Brooke. She lives across town with her husband and their 2 kids, and she was my rock during the breakup. She checks in on me constantly, probably more than I need her to, but I appreciate it. Our parents live up in Seattle, about 3 hours north, and I visit them once a month. Brooke was the one who convinced me to install all the smart home security after Trevor kept showing up. At my old place, she wanted me to feel safe, so I went all in on the smart home thing. I had Alexa devices in my bedroom, living room, and kitchen. I installed a Ring doorbell camera so I could see who was at my door even when I wasn't home. I got smart locks that I could control from my phone, and I put a security camera in my living room pointing at the front door. Trevor actually helped me set most of it up when I first moved in, back when we were still trying to be friendly after the breakup. He's good with technology, works in IT, so he knew exactly how to configure everything. At the time, I thought it was nice of him to help. I had no idea what a mistake that was. I'd been living in that apartment for 8 months, feeling safe and independent, rebuilding my life. I'd even started dating casually again. Nothing serious, just a few dates here and there with guys I met on apps or around the neighborhood. There was Marcus, who I went out with 3 times before we both decided there wasn't a real connection, and Ryan, a barista at my favorite coffee shop who asked me out twice. Nice guys, but nothing that went anywhere. The night everything fell apart was a Wednesday in late October. I'd worked late finishing a project for a demanding client, ordered Thai food for dinner around 8 p.m., and spent the evening watching a true crime documentary series on Netflix. I remember thinking how ironic it was that I was watching stories about home invasions and stalkers while feeling completely safe in my own apartment with all my security technology protecting me. I went to bed around 11:30, and like I did every single night, I checked my phone to make sure my smart lock was engaged and my Ring doorbell was active. Everything showed secure. Everything looked normal. I fell asleep thinking about the project I needed to finish the next day, completely unaware that someone had been watching me for months. I woke up to a voice in the darkness, not a human voice, but my Alexa speaking from across the room where it sat on my dresser. "Someone is watching your camera." The blue ring was glowing, pulsing in the dark bedroom like a tiny lighthouse. My heart jumped into my throat, and I sat straight up in bed, completely disoriented and confused. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and the screen showed 3:14 a.m. For a few seconds, I just sat there trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Maybe I'd been dreaming. Maybe I said something in my sleep that triggered the device. Smart speakers do weird things sometimes, right? They activate randomly, they misunderstand words, they glitch. "Alexa, stop," I said, my voice rough and shaky from sleep. But instead of going silent, the device responded again. "Someone is accessing your security camera feed right now." The artificial voice was calm and matter-of-fact, but the words made my blood run cold. I scrambled for my phone with trembling hands and opened the Ring app, my doorbell camera and the interior security camera. In my living room, both showed green status indicators, meaning they were active and functioning. I pulled up the live feeds. The doorbell showed my empty hallway, just dim emergency lighting and the door across from mine. The living room camera showed my dark apartment, just the faint glow of city lights coming through the big industrial windows. Everything looked normal. Everything looked empty. "Alexa, who is watching my camera?" I don't know why I asked. It's a machine, not a person, but I was scared and confused, and my brain wasn't working logically. The response made every hair on my body stand up. "The access is coming from inside your network. Someone is behind you." I spun around so fast I nearly fell out of bed, staring at the darkness behind me. My closet door was slightly open the way I always leave it. My bathroom door was closed. The shadows looked darker suddenly, like they were hiding something. My bedroom looked exactly the way it always did, but nothing felt safe anymore. I reached beside my dresser and grabbed the baseball bat I kept there, a precaution I'd taken after the breakup with Trevor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip it. I fumbled for the light switch and flooded my bedroom with harsh brightness. Nothing. No one hiding in the closet. No one behind the door. I checked under the bed like a terrified child checking for monsters. Empty. I was alone. But the Alexa was still glowing blue, still waiting, still active like it had more to tell me. I walked through my entire apartment with that baseball bat clutched in both hands, turning on every single light. The kitchen was empty. The living room showed no signs of disturbance. The bathroom was clear. My small office nook had nothing but my desk and computer equipment. I checked the smart lock on my phone and it showed secured. All the windows were latched. There was absolutely no one in my apartment except me. I started to convince myself this was just some kind of technology malfunction. I'd heard stories about people hacking into Alexa devices remotely as pranks, making them say strange things to freak people out. That had to be what this was. Some bored hacker having fun scaring random people in the middle of the night. I went back to my bedroom and unplugged the Alexa, cutting off its power and plunging the room back into quiet darkness, except for the distant hum of city traffic outside. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to slow my racing heart, trying to convince myself everything was fine. Then my phone buzzed in my hand, a notification from the Ring app. Motion detected at front door. My stomach dropped. I opened the app with shaking fingers and watched the doorbell camera feed. It was flickering, going black for several seconds, then coming back. When the picture returned, I saw something that made me stop breathing. There was a handprint on my apartment door, a fresh handprint, the moisture from someone's palm clearly visible on the painted wood surface, reflecting the hallway light. Someone had just been at my door. Someone had touched it while I was inside checking the rest of my apartment. And they did it so quietly, I never heard a sound. I called 911 immediately, my fingers fumbling over the numbers on my phone screen. The dispatcher answered, and I tried to explain what was happening, but my words came out jumbled and panicked. "Someone's at my door. There's a handprint. My Alexa said someone was watching my camera. I live alone, and someone's out there." The dispatcher stayed calm and told me to lock myself in my bedroom, to stay on the line, and that officers were on their way. I pushed my dresser against the bedroom door, my arms burning with the effort, and sat on my bed with the baseball bat across my lap. While I waited, staring at my phone, another notification appeared. My smart lock app was showing an access attempt. Someone had tried to enter a code to unlock my door. The code they entered was wrong, so the door stayed locked, but they tried 3 times. 3 failed attempts in the span of 30 seconds. Someone was standing outside my apartment right now, trying to get inside using codes, like they'd done it before. The police arrived within 8 minutes, though it felt like hours. 2 officers knocked and announced themselves, and I moved the dresser away from my door to let them in. They searched my entire apartment thoroughly, checked the hallway, examined the stairwells and other floors. They found nothing. No one hiding, no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone being there except that handprint on my door which they photographed. One of the officers, a woman named Officer Chen, sat down with me on my couch and asked careful questions. "Has anyone been bothering you lately? An ex-boyfriend? Someone you went on dates with who didn't take rejection well? Anyone who might know where you live and have a reason to scare you?" I immediately thought of Trevor, but I shook my head. My ex-boyfriend and I broke up 8 months ago. He moved to California for a job. I haven't heard from him since July. I mentioned Marcus and Ryan, the guys I'd dated casually, but neither of them seemed like the type to do something this creepy. Officer Chen asked if she could look at my smart home app settings. I handed her my phone and watched as she scrolled through the access logs and security settings. Her expression changed as she read something on the screen. "Ms. Hoffman, your smart lock shows someone successfully accessed it 2 weeks ago at 2:37 a.m. The log says it was opened with a valid code, not forced. Do you remember letting anyone into your apartment at that time?" My mind went completely blank. 2 weeks ago, I was asleep at 2:37 in the morning. No one came over. No one should have been able to get in. That's impossible. I would have heard the door. My smart lock beeps when it opens. Officer Chen's face was grave as she turned the phone toward me. "Unless someone disabled the chime function first." According to these settings, the door chime was turned off on September 28th at 2:35 a.m. and turned back on at 7:15 a.m. the next morning. Someone who understands how these systems work came into your apartment while you were sleeping, turned off the sound so you wouldn't hear them, spent time inside, then locked up and reset everything before they left. The room started spinning around me. Someone had been inside my apartment while I slept, walking through my home, standing in my bedroom maybe, looking at me while I was unconscious and vulnerable. The thought made me want to vomit. Officer Chen kept scrolling through my phone. There are 4 instances of this: September 28th, October 4th, October 11th, and October 18th. Someone has been entering your apartment in the middle of the night, approximately once a week for the past month. Tonight they tried to get in again, but used an incorrect code, which means either their access was revoked or they no longer have the right code memorized. Officer Chen pulled up my camera access history, and her jaw tightened. Your interior security camera has been accessed remotely 17 times in the past 6 weeks. Different times of day and night. Someone has been watching you through your own security system. She showed me the screen with timestamps scattered throughout recent weeks. 11:47 p.m., 2:15 a.m., 6:30 a.m., 1:20 p.m. Random times when I was sleeping, working, eating, living my life, completely unaware I was being watched. The Alexa warning hadn't been a malfunction or a prank. Someone had been actively viewing my camera feed at that exact moment at 3 a.m., and somehow the device had detected it and warned me. Officer Chen looked at me with sympathy and concern. Who set up your smart home system? Who would have administrator access and know all your codes? My stomach dropped as the realization hit me like a physical blow. My ex-boyfriend Trevor, he helped me install everything when I first moved in 8 months ago, but he moved to California. He's been gone since spring. He wouldn't do this. Even as I said the words, I didn't believe them anymore. I remembered the last time I'd seen Trevor, how he'd said something that sounded like a threat disguised as concern. "You'll realize you need me eventually. You can't do this alone. I'll always be part of your life whether you want me to be or not. I'd dismissed it as bitter words from someone hurt by rejection. Now those words sounded like a promise he'd been keeping. Officer Chen immediately called for backup and requested a detective. Within an hour, Detective Ramirez arrived and took control of the investigation. He asked me detailed questions about Trevor, writing down everything I could remember about our relationship, the breakup, and especially the fact that Trevor had helped set up all my smart home devices. The detective made a phone call to verify Trevor's current location in California, and what he discovered made the room go silent. Trevor had never actually moved to California. The job he'd told everyone about, the fresh start in San Francisco, all of it was a lie. Employment records showed he'd been working remotely for a Portland-based tech company this entire time. He'd been living in Portland all along, just 6 blocks away from my apartment. 6 blocks. He'd been nearby for months while telling me and everyone else that he'd left the state. Detective Ramirez obtained an emergency warrant and sent officers to Trevor's address immediately. While they were executing the warrant, the detective stayed with me, explaining what would happen next, trying to keep me calm even though I was shaking uncontrollably. My sister Brooke arrived after I called her, and she sat beside me, holding my hand while we waited for news from Trevor's apartment. The call came an hour later, and what Detective Ramirez told us made me feel physically sick. Officers had found a wall in Trevor's apartment covered in printed photographs of me, hundreds of them, photos of me leaving my building in the morning, walking to the coffee shop on the corner, at the grocery store, sitting in my apartment visible through the windows. He'd been following me for months, photographing me without my knowledge, documenting my daily routine like some kind of twisted surveillance project. His computer was even worse. Trevor had remote access software showing he'd been logging into my smart home system regularly for the past 6 weeks. He had screen recordings saved on his hard drive, hundreds of video files showing me in my own apartment doing completely normal things, working at my desk, making dinner in the kitchen, watching TV on the couch, all recorded without my knowledge or consent. The detective's voice was steady, but his expression showed disgust as he described what they'd found. Trevor also kept a journal, and the entries were disturbing. He'd written about how I would eventually realize breaking up with him was a mistake, how I needed him even if I didn't understand it yet, how we were meant to be together and time would prove him right. The entries became more obsessive and unhinged as the weeks went on, talking about needing to remind me of his presence, needing to stay connected to my life in ways I couldn't see. The final entry was dated 2 days before this night, and Detective Ramirez read parts of it to me. She changed the master access code on her smart lock. I tried the emergency backup code, but it didn't work, getting harder to monitor her safety. Might need to have a face-to-face conversation soon. She needs to understand that we belong together, and this separation isn't healthy for either of us. The detective explained that I must have unknowingly changed my main code at some point recently, maybe through a security update or when I adjusted settings, which revoked Trevor's access. That's why he'd been outside my door tonight trying codes that no longer worked, getting desperate to regain entry. Trevor was arrested at his apartment at 6:30 that morning. He didn't resist or try to run. According to Detective Ramirez, Trevor confessed to everything immediately and didn't seem to understand that he'd done anything wrong. He told the officers he was protecting me, watching over me to make sure I was safe living alone. When they asked about entering my apartment while I slept, he admitted to 4 separate break-ins where he'd walked through my home in the middle of the night. He said he would stand by my bed sometimes, just watching me sleep, making sure I was okay. He'd touch things that belonged to me, go through my belongings, sit on my couch for a while before leaving. He did it to feel close to me, he explained, to remind himself that we still had a connection even though I'd tried to end our relationship. When detectives asked Trevor about the Alexa warning that had woken me up, his demeanor changed. He became agitated and defensive. He insisted he hadn't triggered that warning. He'd been at home watching my camera feed remotely when suddenly the Alexa in my bedroom activated on its own and spoke those words about someone watching. He'd panicked, thinking I had somehow detected his remote access or installed new security that caught him. That's when he'd grabbed his keys and rushed to my building, trying to use his old codes to get inside one more time before I could completely lock him out of the system. That explained the handprint on my door and the failed access attempts. Technical experts later examined my smart home system, trying to understand why the Alexa had spontaneously warned me. They found evidence of unusual access patterns that night, multiple connection points trying to view my camera feed simultaneously, which might have triggered some kind of automated security response. But none of them could definitively explain why the device spoke those specific words at that exact moment when Trevor was actively watching me. Some said it was sophisticated AI security detecting an intrusion. Others called it a glitch with incredibly fortunate timing. My sister Brooke thinks it was something more, some kind of intervention I'll never be able to explain. I don't know what I believe, but I know that warning saved my life. Trevor was charged with multiple felonies, including stalking, burglary, unlawful surveillance, computer crimes, and violation of privacy. The evidence against him was overwhelming and undeniable. The photographs covering his wall, the video recordings on his computer, the access logs from my smart home system, and his own detailed journal entries all painted a clear picture of obsessive stalking that had been going on for months. His lawyer tried to argue that because Trevor had helped install my smart home system, he believed he had implied permission to access it. The judge rejected that argument completely, stating that helping someone set up security devices does not grant perpetual access to monitor them without consent, especially after a relationship has ended. Trevor was sentenced to 6 years in prison with a permanent restraining order that would remain in effect after his release. The prosecutor told me privately that based on items found in Trevor's car that night and the escalating tone of his journal entries, they believed he was planning to physically confront me or possibly hold me captive if he'd succeeded in getting into my apartment. The timeline suggested that night was going to be when he made his move, when he stopped just watching and started acting. If the Alexa hadn't woken me up, if I hadn't called the police, he would have eventually found a way inside. I couldn't stay in that apartment after learning the truth. The knowledge that Trevor had been inside multiple times while I slept, that he'd stood over my bed watching me, that he'd gone through my personal belongings, completely destroyed any sense of safety I'd felt in that space. Every corner of that apartment felt contaminated by his presence. I broke my lease and moved in with Brooke and her family for 2 months while I searched for somewhere new to live. Her kids didn't fully understand why Aunt Kara was suddenly living in their guest room and sometimes crying at random moments, but they were sweet about it, drawing me pictures and sharing their toys to cheer me up. Eventually, I found a small house to rent in a completely different neighborhood, somewhere Trevor had never been, somewhere with no connection to our past. I hired a professional security company to install a new system with military-grade encryption and access controls that only I manage. No one else has codes or remote access capabilities. I also got rid of all voice-activated smart speakers. No more Alexa devices, no more Google Home, nothing that listens in the background. The convenience of asking a device to play music or check the weather wasn't worth the vulnerability and the memories of that night when an artificial voice warned me someone was watching. The experience fundamentally changed how I think about technology and privacy. I'd believed that smart home devices made me safer and more secure, that all those cameras and locks and connected systems were protecting me. Instead, they'd been weaponized by someone with technical knowledge and malicious intent. Trevor had turned my own security system into a surveillance network, using the very tools I'd installed for protection to stalk me and invade my privacy for months without my knowledge. Detective Ramirez told me this is becoming increasingly common in domestic abuse and stalking cases. Abusive partners exploit smart home technology because many people don't understand how to properly secure these devices or don't realize they can be accessed remotely. I started speaking publicly about my experience, doing interviews with local news outlets, and writing articles about technology safety. I wanted other people to understand the risks and learn how to protect themselves. Simple steps like changing all default passwords, enabling 2-factor authentication, regularly reviewing access logs, and immediately revoking all system access when any relationship ends can prevent what happened to me from happening to others. Brooke feels guilty that she didn't notice something was wrong during those months Trevor was stalking me. She'd had an emergency access code to my apartment, and she didn't realize that code was part of a system Trevor could monitor and potentially exploit. I've had to reassure her repeatedly that there were no signs for her to notice because Trevor was deliberately invisible, using technology to maintain his presence in my life while remaining physically hidden. That's what made it so terrifying. I went about my normal routine for months, working from home, video chatting with my sister every week, feeling safe and independent, while someone was watching my every move and entering my home while I slept. The violation of privacy and the betrayal of trust cut deeper than any physical harm could have. My therapist explained that this type of surveillance abuse creates a specific kind of trauma because it destroys your sense of safety in the one place that should feel most secure, your own home, and it makes you question your own perception because the abuse was happening without any visible evidence. The piece of this story that still haunts me, the part I think about late at night when I'm having trouble sleeping, is why the Alexa warned me. The technical experts gave their explanations about system conflicts and automated security responses detecting unusual access patterns, but none of them could say with certainty why the device spoke those exact words at that precise moment. Someone is watching your camera when Trevor was actively viewing my feed from his apartment. Behind you, when he wasn't physically in my room, but was figuratively stalking me from the shadows of my life. Some people tell me it was just an incredibly lucky glitch, a random malfunction that happened to occur at the perfect time. Brooke insists it was divine intervention, that something or someone was looking out for me and used the only tool available to send a warning. My therapist suggests it doesn't matter why it happened, only that it did, and I listened. I don't know what I believe about it. I'm not particularly religious or spiritual, but I can't shake the feeling that something beyond random chance was involved. What I do know is that if I dismissed that warning, if I'd unplugged the device and gone back to sleep without checking my security apps or calling the police, Trevor would have eventually gotten back inside my apartment. And based on everything the prosecutor said about his escalating behavior and what they found in his car, that night very well could have been my last. I still work as a graphic designer, still live alone, still value my independence, but I'm more cautious now about everything, not just technology, but relationships and trust in general. I pay attention to red flags I used to ignore. I take my safety seriously in ways I didn't before. I'm in therapy working through the trauma of knowing I was violated in such an intimate way for so long without any awareness. Some days are harder than others. I still have moments of panic when I hear unexpected noises or when I notice something slightly out of place in my home. But I'm healing, slowly, and I'm using my experience to help others by sharing what happened and teaching people how to protect themselves in an increasingly connected world where privacy is harder to maintain. If this story made you think differently about the technology in your own home, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Check your smart home access logs tonight if you have these devices. Change your passwords regularly. Set up two-factor authentication on everything. And if you've recently ended any relationship with someone who had access to your digital life, revoke that access immediately without exception. Don't wait. Don't make excuses. Don't assume they would never misuse it. Trevor seemed like a normal person going through a difficult breakup. My friends liked him. My family thought he was good to me for most of our relationship. No one suspected he was capable of months of calculated stalking and repeated break-ins. You can't always predict who will become dangerous, but you can protect yourself by controlling who has access to your home and your private life, both physically and digitally. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember that the most dangerous threats often come from people who once had our trust. Thank you for watching.